Hello, everyone. Dr. Eames here. This time I'd like to talk about microaggressions. Now, this is not one of the topics that our author is necessarily covering, but it is such a big part of how stereotypical thinking gets reinforced and so forth. And a lot of it really is unintentional, but it's done out of ignorance also. And we have to really caution ourselves when we see ourselves doing this type of behavior. And so, what is a microaggression? Well, used a lot of times, it's verbal behavior. It's all directed at a person's appearance or their ethnicity or something like that. It's generally perceived as being very what's the word for it? Very adverse by the people that it's directed at. A lot of times it is unintentional, but it shows a great lack of tact and lack of cultural savvy and cultural knowledge, of course. But sometimes these things are intentional also. And how is a person to know who has just been through what they consider a humiliating sort of experience? And so these microaggressions are things we say to other people that the way they're perceived is hostile, generally derogatory, definitely like it says here. There are negative ethnic slights and slurs, and they are generally insults towards people of color. So let's go ahead and look at this one terrific article I've come across that really hits to the heart of this matter. Give me a moment to change screens. Okay, what we see here is an article from BuzzFeed. It's a few years old now. I've been using this one in this class for quite a while. It's all the way back to 2013, but it was updated this month, this year. So I'm glad it's going to still be around because I think it's very valuable. So let's consider what I've already said about microaggressions. This was a project done at Fordham University's Lincoln Center on campus. A bunch of typical college students like yourself were asked to write down instances of racial microaggression that they'd encountered. And this is just in one campus and one college in the United States. And this is what I would say is very typical behavior. No, where are you really from? Now, there's a lot associated with this sort of microaggressions. There is some research on it. People have been researching academics for some time. It was called micro inequities for a while. I think microaggressions is a much better term. And of course, labels matter. Microaggression properly puts it in its place as aggressive behavior, it's hostile, and so forth. So take a look at some of these. I think they will have an impact on you as I work through them. These are some of the ones that Fordham students identified. What are you? Human? Is what she says. I'm human. Being biracial doesn't make me a what. What are you? This goes back to that notion of, oh, there's three races of people. No, there certainly is not. Everybody's part of the human race. And, wouldn't it be boring if we all looked the same, for crying out loud? So what do you guys speak in Japan? Asian? You know, this has got to be a humiliating experience for many Asians. Asia is not a monolith, right? There are just untold numbers of cultures and types of people. And to assume every Asian you meet is Japanese or they're all Chinese, uh, this is insulting the way it's phrased too. Asian is a language, and I would be certain that most people know that. So that would be a humiliating thing to say to another person. You don't act like a normal black person, you know? Okay, where to begin on this one? This is like the person who says, well, I don't want to spoil one of the other microaggressions coming up. Um, this is denying human individuality. This is saying, I have a stereotype of how all black people are supposed to act. And for some reason, you are going counter to my stereotype. What is up with you? And see, reinforces that notion that I've talked about, that People don't update their categories and labels for people when things disprove their stereotypes. You don't act like a normal black person. Well, maybe what you think a normal black person acts like is not what most people would think. And so this is very stereotypical. This is a microaggression. This is the one I didn't want to say. Courtney, I never see you as a black girl. What? How could you go up and have a conversation with her and not notice that she's a black girl? I think many people do this particular one. I've seen it in action, and it makes me cringe. It just says, are you blind? Um, People don't want to be treated like they don't exist, like they don't have a reality, that there's something wrong with them, so you can't even mention. So think of it from the point of view of the recipient. Just because I'm Mexican, that doesn't mean I should be automatic first choice for the role of Dora the Explorer in the high school skit, right? And we've kind of uh, dealt with this a little bit in our movies today, in our feature films and entertainment. Um, we are seeing people of color taking over roles that are normally reserved for white people only, and in the thinking that only white people can be actors or actresses and so forth, or that you have to be typecast. I can see where it wouldn't necessarily be too appropriate with a Euro-American trying to act like an Asian or a black person or something, but I see no reason why an Asian or a black person can't take a role of a famous person or a mythical person, regardless of ethnicity. So, like, what are you? So this guy is obviously a person of color, but for many people, that confusion over, gee, I can't exactly fit him where he belongs. That's part of the problem with people. They want to pigeonhole people and groups of people. People tend to like to want to do stereotypical thinking. And so who knows? But it's very degrading to have some people come up and ask you, who are you? Where do you belong? What are you? Well, I'm a person. What do you mean you don't speak Spanish? Yeah, this is the assumption that's out there. If you meet a Latinx person, that, oh, they all have to speak Spanish. Believe me, they do not. And we have many different generations of Latinx people in this country, everything from Cubans uh, to Puerto Ricans to Mexicans to Guatemalans and Nicaraguans and all the rest. And this is another very hurtful thing to say. It assumes that they can't be a fellow American like anybody else, that they have to be something. No, you're white. Some people don't always look like their ancestry they know the truth of, right? And it does happen. And so people want to argue with you. Isn't that crazy? And they will argue with you, people that hold stereotypical thoughts. They can't get beyond your appearance. So if you tell them you have a certain type of ancestry and you know it to be true, they're going to want to argue with you. That's really irrational thinking. And again, irrational thinking is part of holding stereotypes. When people think it's weird that I listen to Carrie Underwood, okay, I don't even have to say anything here, right? The girl, this is disgusting. I have heard comments like this myself in various settings, and it is disgusting. This girl sitting next to me moves to sit closer to someone she's talking to, and this white guy whispers loudly that she moved because I smell like rice. This is an outright racial slur. This goes beyond stereotypical thinking and to beyond a prejudicial way of thinking, discriminatory action of talking it out loud and saying it where it could be overheard. It meant to be hurtful. That's discrimination. That's an act of discrimination. And I think this one goes beyond a microaggression in that sense. And this is also falls into the disgusting. So what does your hair look like today? And she tells us, she said as she pulled off my hat without my permission. Um, there's just no excuse for this kind of behavior. And I think this goes beyond a microaggression to this is aggression. It's hostility. What did we say or what have I discussed that leads people to harbor these stereotypical thoughts? Powerful emotions, fear, suspicion, distrust, dislike, feelings of superiority. You can imagine how many times she may have heard that phrase, and this is how she feels like responding. The limited representation of my race in your classroom does not make me the voice of all Black people. In other words, he's responding to stereotypical thinking that says he should act a certain way, he should talk a certain way, he should do things a certain way, and he should understand and be able to talk eloquently on all things Black. And he should be able to speak for the Black race, even though we don't have a Black race, we have a Black ethnicity. This happens not just to African Americans, this happens to Asians and Latinx people and so forth. So you're Chinese, right? Very similar to the one we had earlier. People assuming that all Asians are one thing or another, depending on your particular stereotype. Or people wanting to argue with you about your ancestry, your ethnicity. Wouldn't that be hurtful? Standing next to my mom, she doesn't tell us who her mom is or what her mom looks like. Why is your daughter so white? Obviously, her mom might be a woman of color. Think how hurtful that might be. Like she has to justify her daughter's existence or how she looks. This is microaggressions. These are hurtful things. If someone said this unintentionally, it's really lacks tact, obviously, at the minimum. This happens. This happens. When I gave a speech about racism, the MC introduced me as Jaime Garcia. My name is Jaime Rodriguez. Not all Latinos have the last name Garcia. You're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl. Oh my God. How do you respond to that? People of color are not allowed to be beautiful? It's just totally nuts. These things are hurtful. That's downright mean. Can you read this? He showed me a Japanese character on his phone. Again, assuming groups of people are monoliths and that they know all things. In this case, all things Asian. Why do you sound white? This is the same thing as a couple of the others we've seen. People don't act according to your stereotype, so you have to question them on it. This is really derogatory. You're mocking someone's physical appearance? Okay, I think that's probably good enough, folks. That's all I want to talk about this time, but it is some serious things to talk about. I'll talk again to you soon.